look at that.
She's already recording it.
Okay, then.
Hello, friend. I didn't know that. I think when I open it, it said record. Excellent. Hello, friends.
Hi.
I see your mouse.
Yes. That's funny. Kristen, I have to.
Welcome, friends. Here we are for our last module 5 and 6 discussion. I really enjoyed many of the videos. I thought the videos were very interesting. And one of the videos before I start the questions I thought was so interesting is the crash course, which we show crash courses for our students. So I thought that was very interesting that they had it for adults too. And it was definitely put on my level. So I very much appreciated that. So to start off with our first question, it said, how does understanding the semantic relationships between words such as synonyms, antonyms, hyponyms, and hypernyms enhance your ability to teach vocabulary to monolingual and multilingual learners? Was a lot thrown in there. I thought the coolest thing was I always just categorized like homophones, synonyms, antonyms, and I learned some new terminology. So I thought that was very cool. So what did you guys think about that question?
Look.
I'm like going through the textbook, like chapter 5 of the textbook. I thought there were a lot of great ideas in there of just different ways to like practice with vocabulary words and using all those skills. So I got a lot of ideas about there with the money bingo board. I highlighted a lot of them that I thought were really neat that you could definitely see implementing even in a first grade classroom. But we do a lot of these too, like a small group and independent work time, like looking at vocabulary words, like illustrating a picture of it, practicing writing sentences with it, identifying parts of speech. So there was just a lot in there that I noticed that we just do innately in our classrooms. And I guess I didn't really know like the work we were doing when we were practicing these skills.
Like the categorization of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote that understanding the semantic relationships between words greatly enhances teaching vocabulary because it provides a structural way to build connections between words and make vocabulary acquisition more meaningful for both monolingual and multilingual learners. Again, the synonyms, the antonyms, when you teach a student that this vocab word, has these synonyms and antonyms, you're increasing their vocab in that way as well. I feel like it facilitates, and me, look, I write all this down because I'm a paper kind of girl. Facilitates a deeper understanding of words. It helps multilingual learners link new vocabulary words to their first language words through synonyms and antonyms, and you can provide them that bridge to understanding the new vocab. You can connect it to their first language. And then, Kristen, like you said, I really enjoyed a lot of the vocabulary activities that were mentioned. And same, I'm even using so many of the strategies in my class that I teach, the reading intervention little kiddos. We're teaching iReady, and there's little lessons within the iReady, embedded in iReady that we use. And there's always a section that talks about word mapping where you find antonyms and synonyms and vocabulary definitions, draw a picture, all those things that we do when we introduce vocabulary. So
definitely. I really liked how you used the word linking, that it really is linking and bridging, with their home languages. I thought it was cool. Back to that crash course. I thought that was such an interesting video, because obviously I only speak English, and I remember trying to learn Spanish and how complicated, yet down the road it should have made so much more sense, because they just have such a direct way of learning their language. But like the semantic relationships are in languages, but not all languages. And I did not realize that. So I thought it was interesting when it was talking about the Polish language. Like in English, we talk about like, I know a person, that's knowledge, right? But then they talked about how they have two versions of the word know, and they have weem and zanam, but one means I know a fact, but the other one's referring to specifically a person. And I just thought that was so fascinating that you have the same word and we use it and have to read within context. And in their language, they have specific words that are similar, but then they match their own context. So I thought that was fascinating. And then I laughed when they were talking about euphemisms, and they were talking about like the toilet. That's so rude. Like, you don't say that. So we changed it to the washroom or go to the cloth, and it's like, oh, I never would have thought about that. And so she said, well, imagine in different languages trying to define sandwich. And I thought that was such a cool concept. Like, cross-culturally, it's so drastically different because sandwiches look different in many languages. How would you describe it? Certain sandwich might have certain filling, or it might have different kinds of bread. And I'm like, wow, you never would have thought about how complex semantics really is. So I did find quite a few of the videos very interesting, especially the reading rockets. They showed the word gradients.
I love that.
I thought that was so cool. And I'm like, wow, I want to start doing that in my own class, because when you saw the kids having conversations about the word tiny versus humongous and all the other words in between, and how to organize it from the smallest, the micro, all the way to, the humongous, I think was the last word. Just what a cool way to help kids understand within different contexts. It's broadening that deeper understanding for them. So I thought that was really cool.
And that just supports the article, the Hebert article I have underlined, that conversations have been shown to be a powerful means of supporting students' awareness and knowledge of vocabulary. So that's a great way to support with conversations with the gradient words.
Absolutely. So, I mean, down the road, I think to just really summarize, oh goodness, I'm too still. Hold on. There it goes. To summarize that first question, I think we would all agree that building semantic relationships with all of those different types of words, you're building connections for your kids. You're helping them learn how to process and understand better, which is going to help them in their reading comprehension. It's going to help them down the road in their writing. So yeah, another thing I thought was cool, when they talked about that book, A Seed is Sleepy, and using books as springboards, I thought was really neat. And I like how the teacher, one of her examples was one of the largest seed is 60 pounds. Like, what a cool visual. And the little girl was like, well, I weigh 56 pounds. And they're like, oh my gosh, that seed's as heavy as her. Trying to make a visual to the connection with the vocabulary, I thought was really cool. And I laughed because the little boy at the end of the video was like, man, can you imagine if they were saying, that's just plain small. Man, that makes it sound so drab. And his words, I thought was so cute. So when you think about it, yeah, it's going to benefit and expand their vocabulary, but it's also going to down the road enhance their own writing to allow them to be, more detailed writers. I thought that was cool. Yeah. So that was that. All right. Question number 2. It was discuss the role of core vocabulary in developing proficient reading comprehension. How do you select and teach core vocabulary words in your classroom to support your students' semantic development and overall literacy skills?
When I read about this, I was thinking to myself, how did we teach vocabulary 15, 20 years ago? And, 15, 20 years ago, we had a book called Wordly Wise. And third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade student at our school had Wordly Wise. And it's, of course, the exact opposite of what research supports now. And, they would randomly memorize, 12 to 13 words, in that book for the week. And they have a test on Friday. But some of the activities were great, though. Now that I'm thinking about synonyms and antonyms, and they had some close reading activities. Y'all remember those?
Yeah.
And that's the way I learned, honestly. And that's obviously not what we do now. I can't even tell you how many years it's been since we've had those books, but it's hard to break away from that.
That's what I used.
It hasn't been that long. I mean, I feel like in the
past 5 years,
we really use them here at Davis.
That was that company made a lot of money off of our school because we used it for years. I promise you. But
they sold them in the bookstore.
Yes. Every child had to have one. now for wait, what was the first thing? Discuss
role.
the role of it. Okay. I said that it provides students with the foundation words necessary to understand the meaning of most text. Strong core vocabulary enhances fluency by enabling faster word recognition.
Mhm.
It also forms the basis for effective spoken and written communication. And then how we select words now, it was mentioned in the article, Core Vocabulary, Foundation of Proficient Comprehension. Just recently, I'd say the past 2 years, we learned the 3-2-1 tiered system about core vocabulary. And the tier 1 words are the words that most, all students know, that come to you knowing. The tier 3 words are those subject specific words. And then the tier 2 are the words that we focus on, obviously the 2s and a little bit of the 3s. But we've just started learning that process, I'd say, in the past 2 years. And I feel that we're seeing great benefits from that as we're learning to use that and that strategy. The 3-tier model is what it was called. So I thought it was great that we were reading about something that has been pushed. It's kind of a school initiative of selecting vocab words that way for the past 2 years. And I felt like that article really validated why we're doing that at our school.
That is awesome.
How do you guys choose vocab at your school?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we do a lot of vocab like embedded in our phonics instruction. So like if we're working on like beginning blends, ending blends, and we're doing rapid reading of words, like at the end of a word list, we'll stop and we'll ask and be like, okay, raise your hand if there's a word that you don't know the meaning of. So I feel like a lot of conversations with vocabulary happen within there. And then because of that, I do notice like if we're reading a read aloud, my class will stop and ask for clarification. Like if I read a word, like, hey, what does that mean? So it's just like promoted a lot of good conversations to start to happen. Just by like practicing like understanding vocabulary words just in simple ways.
Well, and learning to check the context too, because I know with some of our most recent because Kristen's in charge of doing our rapid call activities. They're really cool because we do them on a PowerPoint and they build on each other.
Oh, cool.
And when we finish, we go through the words like she was saying, but there's been quite a few that are multi-meaning words. So depending on how you use it, it could be a verb, it could be a noun. And then having kids come up with sentences to, show that they understand what that word means, has definitely led to excellent conversation for sure. But I do know, just in reading and, picking books ahead of time that we've already read and we know about, and picking words that we want to immediately just have a conversation about, is definitely, I think, a great thing to do. And I do lots of read arounds. This is the only time that my kids are ridiculously awesome. So I pull lots of books throughout the day.
I love reading aloud.
But, I love read alouds. It does. It helps them connect. So, picking words ahead of time, I think, is really important. Having class discussions, but making the class discussions end up feeling natural, I think, is a really important piece, especially with your kids who are multilingual learners, because you're teaching that conversation piece as well. But I know with words, I love doing pictures. I think visuals are excellent for kids, especially in our age group. But I even think when I taught 3rd grade, we did lots of, like if I slice a tomato, well, showing a picture of a tomato sliced, so they can really make that connection. I think is a really good thing. But I also really like repeated readings or using readings that have similar connections, similar vocabulary, is a really important thing. But I mean, overall, when you're building vocabulary with kids, you're just whether they're multilingual or not, you're helping them with comprehension. But I think the biggest thing is helping them learn new words to help down the road express themselves. Because when you get older and more mature, you start experiencing more feelings. And how do I describe how I'm feeling? How can I connect to my friend? How can I show that I understand what they're going through and what they're feeling? So I think, that's definitely important. I thought the video about the semantic feature analysis, that SFA concept, I've never heard of that. And I thought that was really cool. And even though I think that might have been a 4th grade class, I thought it was neat. Obviously you have to be very prepared with a lesson like that. And then depending on your kids' abilities, narrowing down. You might have had 20 words. Okay, we're only going to do, 7 for this group. So I felt that was cool because you could differentiate very, well with that. But what a cool concept, especially trying to do nonfiction reading activities with your kids. Because I mean, if you're looking across curriculum, there's a lot of terminology in those courses. That's hard to make connections for. So I thought that was a really cool activity to do.
And I think as you progress in the grade levels, that the vocabulary needed for the subject area is really, there's a lot of it. There's a great amount of subject area vocab needed to understand what you're learning in fourth and fifth grade. I know of, and I'm sure as it goes on up through the grade levels. One thing that I told y'all we've been doing looking at morphology, and I loved. I don't know if it was in an article that I think it was in the core vocabulary article, but it mentioned morphological families, and I see that being because if you can teach them again what the root means, like rupt. Look at all the words you can figure out: interrupt, erupt, eruption. I mean, there's so many words if you just teach them. And again, that starts more of your upper grades, fourth and fifth, for sure. If you can teach them the base and what that means, they can just figure out so many words that they're going to need. And I don't know, it was in one of our articles, but it was talking about how vocabulary is, hold on a second. Vocabulary is like directly related to like their academic success. Do y'all remember reading something about that? I thought I highlighted it in this article, but I don't see it. But it was like, I'm sure I'll find it, but something about like, their vocab can be directly, students' vocabulary knowledge can be directly related to how successful they are in school. And I was like, wow, that's why it's so important for parents even to have those conversations when they're young, not sticking them on a tablet like I always see.
Which is definitely impactful in the classroom. You can definitely tell that parents are not talking to their children anymore just because of the amount of words. Like just like simple words, you would think that they would tier 1 vocabulary words that they should know.
Yes.
But I feel like that, just referring to Kristen's kids, because I interact with them so much, like her youngest makes me laugh because when you talk to her, she's like hanging out with a real human being. And I think that's a lot of credit. And I feel like I do the same, especially with my oldest, their vocabulary just in conversation, because we've never talked to them like a baby. And when you're talking, they're like, oh, what does that mean? And you tell them, and the next day they use the word and you're like, oh, it was used wonderfully, is extremely impressive. I mean, people will tell me all the time that my oldest, they're like, you could just hang out with her, and I think that's a really cool thing. My 3-year-old has started using words that I find so funny. And you're like, wow, they really do listen. And they pay attention to how you interact. They pay attention to your mannerisms when you say certain things and the animation that comes out. Yes, for sure.
They catch it all. The only other thing that I wrote for question 2 is I'm specifically working with ELs. I said have my EL students work in small group pairs, maybe give them a list of words, have a list of words ready for them. ELs look for cognates and to translate some words as a point of reference, incorporate visuals. That's all. Incorporate visuals. Working in small group pairs is important as well. I think that's the conversation piece that you said that making sure students have those conversations. And sometimes I've been guilty of it in class. I feel like I do more talking sometimes than I allow them to talk. And you have to really make a really effort, be conscious of how much you allow the students to have good academic dialogue in the classroom because they can learn so much from each other.
And I wrote down turn and talks. We do that a lot in first grade, and giving them that opportunity to have conversation with one another, I think is really important. But, like back in the day, we used to do a lot more word walls, and I think that might be something important to bring back, but it shouldn't just be a word wall. It should be like a word wall combined with visuals, especially in, social studies and science, trying to, get that subject area vocabulary embedded throughout the room, because I'm amazed at how many actually pay attention to their surroundings. And when we take tests, they're trying to use resources. And I think that's brilliant.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I thought that was a really good question.
Absolutely.
But I do think we do a lot of those things. So that makes me good too.
I feel like I've got a handle on teaching vocab. For sure.
Yeah, right.
I do.
So moving on to the third question, I really liked how she grouped semantic and pragmatics together because I do think that I was not good about understanding the differences of those two words. I think I just have always lumped them together. But how does pragmatic competence influence effective communication in our classroom? Was our next question, which I felt like was a heavy question. So that video I'm trying to remember.
There was one that was really short. It was like an 8-minute video.
Yes. That was the first one. And then the other one was the girl from Trinity College in London who I had trouble following her.
Me too.
But I do think I liked that she had lots of visuals to go through her presentation. So yeah.
I found it hard to follow her too, but
I had a hard time with both of those videos, honestly. I don't know why. I don't know if it was where my brain was, but I almost like had to watch them like twice. There was a lot of information. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of information that was just coming at me and it was good, but I struggled with those videos.
So I looked at it as when you're looking at Pragmatics, one of my favorite characters of all books is Amelia Bedelia. And that was my perfect way of categorizing the differences. When you're looking at Pragmatics goes beyond the literal. So it can be very ambiguous. So one of my favorite books of Amelia Bedelia is when she goes camping with her boss and he goes pitch the tent. So she literally pitches it. She throws it instead of sets it up. Or let's go fishing. And she just jumps in the water and starts grabbing fish. So trying to figure out, I think that is a very hard concept for especially ELLs, but honestly, a lot of lower elementary kids struggle, I feel, with this as well because of just the ambiguity of it. So I thought one of the examples was funny from the first video, the shorter one. She said, I was, at a party and somebody said, yeah, I work in labor delivery. And she goes, yeah, my grandpa did too. Well, no, I work with babies. Like I help deliver babies. Or if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, sure you did, versus, oh, sure, you should go do that. You're using the same word, but you're looking at body language. You're looking at the context of what you guys are having a conversation about. And that's really hard because they do lack that exposure. You think of idioms. I know third grade does an awesome activity where they act out the idioms.
That's what I wrote down. Charlotte just did that last year. It's super cute. So each, they do it in third grade and each student has to pick, like Charlotte's was don't rain on my parade. And they have to come to school and they have like, Charlotte had an umbrella hat. And then we had like parade balloon floats all over her body. And like, they have to try to guess what their idiom is.
Oh, so cute.
That is a really neat activity that third grade does.
But it brings it to life. It helps them understand the literal, you know what I mean? And I just think that is they need, you think about it, ELLs, and I just think kids in general, you have to teach them how to interact appropriately and how to process what they're saying, which is a really hard thing to do. So I know like for Kristen and I, looking up activities for Christoph to do for our project, the trying to look at activities to do with this is really it's a social activity. Like sitting there and having a conversation with him and seeing how he processes and interprets those things. So yeah, I mean, effective communication, it's not just in the academic world, it's the social world too. So
I loved your example of Amelia Bedelia. And because we're of our age and we understand pragmatics, I thought, oh gosh, what kind of connection do I have to this? And the only thing that I could think of is when in the video, and they're talking about the emails. Do you remember when emails first started 10 years ago? You couldn't, you're like, whoa, are they saying this in this tone or that tone? Because all the expression and the hands, everything's taken out of it. And you literally can't read their words. And I thought, how many times do I send someone like a friendly reminder with a smiley or a thumbs up? Like, I'm not being ugly, and I thought,
text messaging all the time, right?
Yes. So I kind of thought, wow, how hard must it be for a student, learning our language, plus all that on top of it. When I know the language, it's hard for me to figure out emails and text messages and what people say, what they mean or how they feel when they say it. So that just kind of helped me put myself in an EL shoes. What must
Absolutely.
that be like? How frustrating and hard must that be?
Yeah.
Based
Well, and it
on,
makes you think whether a student is, if a student's not successful in academics, I would definitely want them to be able to be successful in the real social world, So
yeah,
teaching them to have, real world conversations, learn how to ask for help appropriately, learning how to talk to your elders, learning how to talk appropriately and thank the lunch ladies in the lunchroom. Like
Mhm.
I do a lot of conversation with my student. To me, that's building character, you
Yeah.
know. Um, I don't think a lot of parents have these conversations with kids anymore. So when you do have ELLs that come, and who knows what their parents are going through, um, and where they've come from, it's like, wow, it's definitely something you need to help them understand. And you think about, like, my dad was the president of a company for many, many years, and he traveled all over the world. And before he would ever go anywhere, he would have to learn about all of this of that country so
Sure.
he didn't offend anybody or
Mhm.
legally get himself in trouble. Like you go to Singapore, the way that you sit, like we cross our legs here, you cannot do over there. If you show the sole of your foot, you instantly could be thrown in jail, or you could
Wow.
get a ticket because you are saying that their country is filthy and they take pride in their cleanliness. So or like what the fingers that you point with over there could be different from the fingers that we use to point with here. So it just makes you wonder. I mean, pragmatics, that affects everybody, but it
Yeah.
can be different in all cultures. So
Yes.
I thought that was a really fascinating
A
question.
few years ago, we had an assistant principal who started the initiative of welcoming and greeting your students at the door. And we know that's what we should do, but gosh, you just get overloaded with things you have to do in your classroom sometimes.
Mhm.
And so one thing that she was telling us is we have to teach students to, when you walk by someone, they say good morning, they don't know. I mean, they just keep walking by and you're like, whoa, whoa, stop, make eye
Mhm.
contact. Good morning. How are you
Response.
today? And just
Mhm.
There was
having
a
that dialogue and teaching them what to do in the morning and greet with greetings. And
Mhm.
we started that a few years ago and we've continued. The children have gotten so much better. All students.
Mhm.
There was a special ed teacher last year who would like stand up at the front and like at first she was like training them and she would have like Tootsie Rolls. So like she would, she just noticed that she would be saying good morning to the students as they got off the bus and they would like, we're just like ignoring her and walk right
Yes.
past.
Mhm.
So she would stand up there with her jar of Tootsie Rolls and like they started to catch on. And then she took the Tootsie Rolls away and now she still does it, but she has no Tootsie Rolls. It's just kind of funny but like those are conversations we have in first grade too.
For
Like
sure.
I may be busy working and like getting stuff ready, but as they come in the door, I do good morning, Tucker, good morning, and making
Yeah.
sure I'm calling them by their name. And like I'll say it multiple
And make
times
sure they respond.
if they don't respond to me.
Mhm.
Yes.
Because it comes
Um,
off as rude. It's
yeah,
disrespectful. I
It
mean, a
is.
yeah.
lot of adults do that as well.
Mhm.
I know when I taught special ed, my little friends, we did a lot of formal greetings versus informal greetings. And we would have a lesson. It'd be a 10-minute lesson where we would go around and we would practice. And when we'd get really good at it, we would walk in other classrooms. Because I mean, people were so accepting at my old school of
Yeah.
doing activities like that. Yeah, we're going to do the same. Let's have them come in and practice today. And it helped them with their interaction with their gen ed peers. So we could gradually merge them because they did struggle with social, responses and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's a fun thing to do. And it should be natural. And I think a lot of people feel that it's not,
Mhm.
you
Mm-mm.
know. All right. Moving to our next one. How can you incorporate activities that help students understand and use pragmatic elements of language appropriately in different social contexts? Provide examples of how you can teach pragmatics to your students, focusing on the social norms, cultural conventions, as well as context-specific language use. Let's see.
Oh, let's see. I
This
wrote
was the girl Trinity, the one that I had trouble understanding.
Mhm.
I had to watch her video very slowly and pause and go back quite a few
Mhm.
times. But I really thought she did a great job of helping us understand the concept of role playing. And she came up with a ton of different websites and things that you could go to do this, where you do a lot of role playing. You talk about greetings and apologies. How to do requests, I thought was really interesting. Using films, recordings, real life scenarios. And she talked a lot about it has to be, especially for ELLs, very explicit teaching. You have to model what an apology looks like, how to ask for help, how to give constructive feedback to a friend if you're working in groups. I was thinking about that today when we were doing our STEM projects with our kids. But I loved how she used, because I do this a lot, the film Encanto. She was trying to show when Mirabel was trying to apologize to her sister when she really didn't want to, and pausing and having conversations with students. And I know this week we're doing an attitude of gratitude. So we showed a silent video of a man trying to learn the concept of realizing he has potential to be helpful. And when you're helpful, it allows you to be thankful for your gift. And then you give that gift to others, and then they want to do the same thing. But stopping and having conversations. How would you feel if your balloon was flying away and you saw a tall man and he just kept walking past you when he could have assisted you? What would you have done if you were in their shoes? So thinking about our first graders, doing those short films, I think is a great idea. Role playing, I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes along, like in the text, chapter 6, I have highlighted the hidden curriculum being like those unintended lessons, perspectives, and values that students learn in school that are not officially presented in intended outcomes. So like you said, just like stopping, thinking about our STEM project this week too. We were just in the beginning phases where we were collaborating and sharing and having to like stop and pull them back and be like, okay, what does that mean? It means like letting your partner talk and then giving them time to talk and having a conversation that goes back and forth as opposed to just one person talking, and then time's up. And we need to have, an answer to whatever we're doing. So I think that's big, just stopping, even though it takes time out of your day in our heavily packed schedule of a list of things to do, but like, those are so important skills to have and to stop and just take time for.
I agree with you for sure. And I wrote role playing different conversations for sure. I know in my fifth graders, my fourth graders, they love drama plays, pretend, that there's someone in a certain situation and they have to use a language, that would be appropriate for that situation that they're role playing. That also practices that nonverbal communication, like your eye contact, facial expressions. Another thing that I think that we could use in our classroom to support like board games, to support taking turns in conversations, paying attention to what other people are doing. Board games is a great way. They have to take turns. They have to follow rules. They have to use appropriate language for the situation. I know I have some math games that I set up for my students to use, my math intervention kids, in games, and they do a good job with the games, but also Pictionary and charades, I thought. Was
good ones.
Pretty good too. Those are always fun to pull out. I have some Christmas ones that I do sometimes with the students, but that might be a way to practice nonverbal communication in the classroom. So those are just some ideas that
it teaches vocabulary too. That's cool.
Yes. So maybe something
I noticed too, like speaking and listening, like having to stop a lot this year to, if we're sharing something, taking the time to actually listen to what your peers are saying, because, there'll be 10 hands in the air and I'll call on one person and one student will say one thing and then they'll just repeat the answers over and over. So like, okay, part of speaking and listening is actually listening to what your peers and classmates are saying. And if they said your answer, it's okay to put your hand down and like take some more think time as opposed to just like repeating the same answer over and over too.
There was a little activity that I incorporated in my turn and talks last year, not so much this year because I'm using a different program, but there was a quick little opening activity when the students came in. I had a vocab word on the board and I had a sentence with a blank in it, and they had to, put the vocab word with its right, form or add a to be verb if they needed to in the little sentence. Then they shared with a partner. So they turned and talked and they shared their response. So they might say, an unusual way to get to school would be by spaceship. But then their partner had to say, so your idea was an unusual idea to get to school is by spaceship. And then the other partner had to say, yes, that is correct, or no, that's not correct. And they had to repeat themselves. They had to go back and forth with that dialogue. until the other person listened and repeated their idea correctly. And it was rough in the beginning of the year, but they did master it later on, and that really helped with their listening skills. So I need to do a little bit more of that this year. So your idea was, and they have to repeat that idea before they can share their idea.
Which actually helps in reading. We talked about, answering in a complete sentence. Take the question, restate, the question within your answer. So now that's an awesome activity to do.
That's smart. Quick and easy, and they like it. They like it. They're like, no, you left out the word a, and I'm like, come on, they get really picky with what.
That's so good.
No, that is not correct. And I'm sitting there going, yes, it is. And like, you left out the a, Mrs. Strickland. Cut them a slack. Come on.
That's funny.
But they're funny. But
and then in my mind. I was thinking about, because it does say, what are specific things that you do in your room? Well, I started thinking about what are things that I should start doing in my room, because you should take time to do this. It might not be embedded in our curriculum, but we should do it just as good teachers. So I liked, especially with our first graders, they struggle so much waiting their turn, a simple activity of a turn taking game. And so you would have everyone in a circle and you pass an object, but you ask a question. What's your favorite food? And so the person, it's like the talking stick, talking stick. Whoever has it gets to answer. And that does not mean you can call out and make connections and ask questions or say what yours is. You have to wait till it's your turn, because then you're working on active listening. And then after that person, then you could say, okay, comments and questions. They struggle with that category. All right. We're going to pick 5 people who have questions based off what they just heard their friend say. Well, most of the time they want to say a comment, so learning the difference of that, I thought was a simple way to practice, pragmatics. And then another one, especially if you do have ELL students in your class, thinking about where they come from and picking multicultural stories. And even though I don't have any in my room, naturally just pick stories that are more multicultural to create conversations. And then after you're done reading them, talk about the characters. And if the characters in the story, if they had different titles, instead of Mr. versus Mrs., if they had a different kind of title, talking about that, how would you talk to that kind of person? And then you're talking about greetings and goodbyes and those kinds of things. And then the other one I was thinking, I think we need to do more role playing. I've had so many kids this year that shove papers in my face. It drives me bonkers, learning to wait your turn. And no, you don't shove it in my face. Would you like it if I did that to you? And well, no. And I'm like, well, then why did you do it to me? Let's have a conversation. Stop, everybody. I would not take you to Disney World if that's how you chose to line up, little things like that. But actually making it a lesson time, I think is crucial. What is a polite tone versus a rude tone? Those, I think we do. We need to take more time to have those conversations because it's teaching them how to communicate effectively. So those were the 3 that I came up with.
I love those ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're simple.
I didn't realize working with younger students, this is my first year I've worked with children under 3rd grade, and the kindergartners, so many things that you said, they by 4th and 5th grade, they figured out some of those things, but those kindergartners, they're like what you have at the beginning of the year. It's wow. I mean, the in my face, the 900 questions, it's like, wow. And I kind of just have given up. I need to stop and have those conversations. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, and it's okay to have them. I think back, we used to have a counselor who would do a lesson. It was her hula hoop boundaries lesson.
Oh, yes.
And she would have the kids carry hula hoops around. This is my bubble. And if you want in my bubble, you need to ask permission for my bubble.
That's great.
Our lanyards. I mean, they tend to be in an area that's more of a private area. You don't just walk up and grab it. That's inappropriate. Well, I wanted to look at it. Okay. Well, then how do you ask?
Sure.
They do. We need to have these conversations. And, I was thinking to myself, you have ELLs who might be very, low in their communication skills. So using lots of visual aids, but I think a lot about when I taught my behavioral kids and like all the cards that I had on my
Yes,
computer to be
right
like,
there.
you know,
Like
you weren't
these.
listening to me. Now look at my picture.
Yes.
And I think it's okay to have cards like that in social stories. I know my oldest used to have a really big issue at her other school just about respect because she'd get so excited and just want to like blurt things left and right. Well, that's a respect issue, in my opinion. So I did. I made her a social story about how would you feel if people did X, Y, and Z and put pictures with it. We talked about it. It became her favorite book to read at night, you know? And she didn't take it offensively. It's giving them that immediate feedback on something that they're struggling with. I just think visuals are so important. But once again, it led to a conversation piece. And that's what pragmatics is learning those social cues so you can have, you know, real conversations with people. So I thought those were good ones. Let's see what else I had in there.
Let's see. Drama play, modeling.
Oh, no, this was like my other one I wrote down. Learning to stay on topic is in learning, like modeling that. I think a lot of it is model, especially with our age group and putting them in those scenarios.
There is a lot more of that too. I
Mhm.
feel like this year of just
Oh, yeah.
like staying on the topic. I'm almost, you know, when I see certain hands raised, I'm almost like, do I really want to call on this student right now?
Yeah.
Just because usually they are off topic, but that
Mhm.
does seem to be more of an issue this year than it has been in
Mhm.
the past.
Wonder why that is.
I honestly, I hate to say this because I really, I love my class this year and I really do adore the parents. I don't think parents spend time with their kids in social situations. For example, eating dinner does not mean let's turn the TV on and we sit and eat and watch TV.
Yep.
We teach how to have a conversation. And when you're done eating, you have to ask permission to get up from my table, you know? And if I say no, no means no. And it's because we want to spend time with you and we're not done yet. And that's being respectful, you know? How many of them have their iPads in a restaurant? You
All
know,
of them.
well, the mom and dad want to hang out. I really don't care. You chose to take your family out to dinner. And why is mom and dad also on their phone and your kids are on the iPad? No one's having a conversation. How fun is that?
Yeah.
I know for my kids, we'll take coloring books, you know, but and crossword puzzles and stuff, but they still need to have a conversation at dinner because otherwise they just zone out. Well, adults do too when they're on technology. So I just don't think parents really have conversations with their kids anymore, which makes me sad because it's my generation. I mean, we didn't have AOL till I was what, in like seventh or eighth grade? And
Yeah.
it's like everything changed.
I mean, it really is sad. I really do feel like technology has impacted our society and just the way we
It's like
talk to each other.
CTLS is a text messaging system.
Oh, yeah. I really think CTLS is the worst platform as far as parent communication. I mean, they just rattle off 3-word, no punctuation at 8 o'clock at night and expect me to respond right away. This year, I took it off my phone. I mean, it's not even, if I have to do something on CTLS per my own children, I have to get on my computer and like pull it up because it got to be so like impactful to my mental health to just be receiving
Because
messages.
it felt attacked, like you're being
It did.
attacked.
And it was just like, and then you couldn't sleep and then you were
You were
just
available
fighting about-
24/7.
Yeah. And I was like, it really just is a bad form of communication between parents and students, I feel like.
Which
Or
then means
parents
adults,
and teachers.
and then adults need pragmatic lessons themselves.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do.
You know, hands down.
They're
Yeah.
not respecting boundaries
No.
at
For
all.
sure.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't do much with CTLS because, you know, I don't have a homeroom. So, but I do
Yeah.
have friends that are like, oh, the parent just sent me a message on CTLS and they get it at all hours of the day. And I'm like, oh.
No, I took it off my phone this year. It was just too much to keep up with.
And is our world changing in such a way that these sort of things will just kind of like vanish and like go away? Like, is that what we're going to?
Well, where are we going?
A really good question.
I mean, I'm scared honestly, of like how we are going, like, we're just going to get away from all social interaction with people. Like we were
I think
going, it was
so.
when we were going on the cruise for fall break, and we stopped at this gas station that was like in this very off the wall part, like Florida, we were in the middle of nowhere, and it was a QT. There was like, you literally put the things you were buying on the conveyor belt, and it just beep, 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 beep. Like you didn't have to scan things. You could, I mean, I was just like, this is the weirdest thing ever. Is this how like everything is going to turn into, where like nobody is having a conversation, like waiter per customer, like ordering food, ordering coffee? Like, is it just going to be done all through artificial intelligence? Because it is really kind of creepy when you sit back and think about it.
Very creepy. It is
Yeah.
very, very creepy. But I can see it heading that way. I mean, God.
I know.
Like, what about this little group of kindergartners when they, get in the workforce?
Oh.
What in the world?
That scares me. And they're supposed to take care of me when I'm old and gray.
Yes.
Which is very
scared me.
alarming.
Hi there. I was like, someone's tickling my window.
Who is that?
But no, I think we've had great discussion. And if I could, just try and summarize or I can't even talk anymore. Summarize, the things that we said. I mean, obviously semantics and pragmatics were our focus. When it comes to semantics, we're, really trying to help our kids learn how to construct conversation, and pragmatics put it into implementation, teaching them appropriate, speaking and listening abilities, and being a, respectful human in general, So I think those two merged wonderfully together. So I really enjoyed these module discussions.
Yeah.
So good job, ladies.
Thank you. You did a great job leading.
Ah, you're sweet.
Appreciate you.
All right. I'm going to pause this.